I'm Corin from Greenwood Bonsai Studio here in Nottingham. A few days ago we did a video for you on pruning back a trident maple in early spring. And at that time I said I've got another one that was coming into the nursery soon that needed a similar sort of thing doing to it. This is a Japanese maple, Acer palmatum. I purchased it from a private collection. It should have arrived last week. It's been a bit late arriving, and in that time it started to come into leaf. There's a couple of things I need to do to this tree. Firstly, similar to the trident maple we did last week, the apex of this in particular has got too broad and too much growth on it. The lower branches haven't suffered yet, but they are less vigorous in growth than this apex. With an old mature tree like this, it's very important to control this vigour that you do have and to trim this back to push the vigour into the lower parts of the tree and to maybe to the weaker branches. So there's a couple of things we've got to do. We've got to trim it back to get it back into shape. Also, it's in a fairly unsuitable pot. I would much like it in a wider, shallower pot. This is too deep, too clunky for quite a graceful tree. Ideally, I would have repotted this 2 weeks ago, but because the tree's been delayed getting here, it's coming into leaf. I'd still like to try and repot it if I can. Little bit of a risk. So what I'm going to do, by cutting a lot of this back, I'll be cutting off a lot of leaves and shoots, so the roots won't have as much growth to support. So by trimming this back, it's going to allow me, hopefully, to just get it repotted in a small closing window of opportunity this spring. It has been sprayed. It's got a tiny little bit of black fly on it. When these maples come out in spring, they must be extra tasty to black fly, so it hasn't been in my care till now. So you might notice if we're zooming in a little bit of black fly on it, but it has been sprayed for them, so they should all be taken care of. So again, like we did with the trident maple, good clean sharp pair of scissors, cleaned, disinfected, sharpened to make the cuts on this tree. And then a narrow headed concave pruner, and then another spherical concave pruner for maybe any larger things we need to trim. So I'm going to start off just trimming it back. We also need to have a little bit of a think about where the front of this tree is. We can't just sort of trim it. We can sort of trim it just straight away because we're trimming back structure that needs trimming back no matter where the front is. We've been assessing this tree as to where the front of the tree might be. We've come down to two options. One of the options is a front in there towards you, at this sort of point, so that this smaller tree is at the back to fill in between these two. But this one doesn't have so much movement. The other option is to come around here with the front kind of into you there, and then the advantage of that is this becomes the rear tree and you see this movement in it. Now the disadvantage of that front towards you is this branch here is quite dominant, and particularly when it's in leaf, this is going to come out and stop your eye looking into the composition. So the first cut we're going to make on this tree is this branch here. I'm going to trim that back with a concave pruner, and that is going to be our front of this tree. And then I'm going to make a start trimming round this side, and I'm going to take a lot of these shoots back fairly hard because a lot of these internodes have just got too long for too many years. So we're going to be fairly tough on it and shorten these back to this sort of level, getting rid of these long shoots that are too long and growth that's too heavy and too robust. So we've done this sort of section, working our way round here, same sort of thing. And there will be sections on the upper part of the tree where we have to go even harder than this. But this sort of thing, look, we're probably taking 4 or 5 inches of growth off this tree. These very long internodes, you see here, beneath my finger, there's a bud just here, a latent bud, you can just see it. There's another one here. This distance on a maple here, so that's about 3 inch, about 80 mil. There's not going to be any bud ever break from there. This is too long to have on a refined specimen tree like this. So the only option we've got is to either keep it, which we don't want to keep it, or to trim it back to here so that these buds here pop. So what we're going to do, we're going to trim it back to there. This heavy bit in the centre we're going to take out, and then this one, I'm just going to shorten this back to here. Same with this. So we've got this sort of design. And that's just going to chase it all back. We're going to have another look at this in a year's time, of course. But this is just the first formative pruning, like we did with the trident. You know, every time I sort of step up to a tree like this and I style it, you try and take off the worst bits, keep some of the better bits. And this pruning will be followed up in subsequent years, and then over the course of 3 or 4 years we'll end up making it look a lot more sensible than it started off, and we'll get rid of those long internodes that aren't really becoming on a specimen tree like this. So now I've finished pruning this tree. We've taken it back a good 5 or 6 inches all over. So as I did before with the trident maple video, we've reduced it back in diameter and size. Then I've assessed it and I've taken out some heavy, lumpy, clunky growth at the top. A big section in here, I've reduced back, another section in here. So now I'm happy with the structure of this tree. So the next stage, we're going to take a break. I'm going to take it out of this pot, and we're going to have a look at repotting it and see what the roots are like. Okay, so next thing to do with this is to get it repotted. It's in this pot that's quite deep and not really appropriate. It's not wide in. I think the previous owner had started to take it out of the pot. There we go. Put that pot out of the way. It's got a fair amount of root growth in there. Looks like it's been in there for a number of years. Let's see if we can get it combed out and see what we've got. So we'll start off at the top, same as normal, combing away this, using a fairly blunt root hook so we don't damage any of the surface roots. Get rid of these weeds and moss, it's mostly weeds. We'll try and expose a little bit more nabari around here. See if it's got anything more it can offer us. And because we've trimmed back the upper section of this tree, we should just get away with doing this work. We're doing it a little bit late. Wouldn't like to have done it a couple of weeks prior, but we'll be all right. Now this actual matter root here, I'm going to saw the bottom of that off. There's quite a few heavy ones. It's quite tough, so I'm going to use a reciprocating saw to make the job a little bit easier. Through, look, we should be able to take that off. This is what you get when you've got a tree that's been in a pot too long, in too much of a deep pot. Just a mat of root, not really any good to anybody. Yeah? So we can get rid of that, just throw it away, and then we can start again with the root hook. we could take some of these corners off the saw, make our life a little bit easier. No problem doing that, we're miles away from the actual surface roots. And then with the root hook now, we can get in there and finish up teasing around the edge of this root ball. This is a bit more important because these are the roots and the nucleus that we're going to actually keep, that are going to support the tree in its new pot. I just finished combing the roots out on this tree, put up a bit of a fight. They're quite solid, really a mat of root. And next thing I'm going to try and work around this surface, trying to uncover any more nibari and surface roots. Here, there's lots of really matted growth on the top here. And with either using a root hook or a pair of scissors, I'm trying to cut that away to get down to a lower level of roots on this tree. There must be some in here somewhere. You can see it starts to flare out here, and I've just removed a wire earlier that was cutting across this root. So that's the old wire that held it into the pot. And then some of these, as we tease them out, these bits of root can be trimmed back in here to taper this root ball down to the edge a little bit more. So a little bit of work like that, and then with a nylon bush, or if you need something a little bit more sturdy, the wire bush will just help to show these roots off, get in here and expose these roots around the tree. A lot of these were all covered up before, so it's important to spend the time on this sort of thing, particularly on a tree like this, because those surface roots are going to make quite a difference to the design of the tree and to the quality of the composition of the tree when it's done. So just teasing out this area here, trying to expose these here. There's some woody roots here that we don't need. I'm just trying to excavate these as it comes down. Look, we're just uncovering new roots on here all the time that were previously buried. Another one just here, I think, between these two. So you can use something like that, or on a larger scale, I don't mind using a stiff bristle bush just to shift some of this soil out of the way. Quite quick and easy to use. And then follow it up with scissors to trim out any little bits that we don't need. A little bit more in here. Like that. Just exposing this base all the time, all the way around between these surface roots. And we've been looking at a more suitable pot for this tree. It was in quite a deep rectangle before. It wasn't really doing it any favours. We found a few options. I found a nice oval, but it was a little bit too large, too long. So I've settled on this rectangular pot here to your right, which is shallower, and it's the right sort of depth for this tree. It's a fairly slender tree. I don't want it in something too deep. So we're going to try it into that pot and see if that can be its new home. So let's just get tidied up a little bit. pot. Get that out of the way. And then this oval. The front of the tree was here towards me. A little bit more off this right hand side to allow us to move it over in the pot enough. And then the front was going to be so that we could see that bit of movement. I just want to tilt it up a little bit. So just wedge something underneath it now to show you that. And if I can turn it round to face you, that's the sort of angle, the sort of image that we're looking for. So what we're doing now is we'll take it out of the pot and we'll get the pot ready for the tree and prepare it. Prepared the pot for the tree. We've got a couple of anchor wires into it and we've put some mesh in the bottom of it. So we'll get some akadama, and all of my acers here, I just grow them in neat akadama. So I'm going to do the same with this one. So we'll open a new bag and then we'll pop a bit of akadama in the bottom of the pot, like so. And we'll get the tree carefully, place it in here. And I want it on the right hand side of the pot, leaning over to the left a little bit, so a bit of akadama underneath it should help us get the right angle, a little bit more on this right hand side. Let's just tilt it over, and because it's a triple trunk, you don't want to have a triple trunk where it looks very static, three like that. You want to either twist it this way or that way. So I'm trying to arrange it so that from the front we can see that trunk at the back, but it isn't uniformly exposed between the two at the front, if that makes sense. A few more roots to take off on this front, like so. And here. So once we're happy with that, we can fill in with the akadama. We try and do this quite efficiently and quickly. The sooner I get this done, I can get the tree outside, give it a good water, and then that's the end of the procedure done. It looks a lot better in this shallower pot. The one it was in before was just far too deep for it, and it was just visually too heavy and too oppressive for the composition. Then a potting stick and chopstick. I always work my way around first doing this, just to get rid of any air pockets, and work the akadama in around the base of the tree and around the perimeter of the root ball. And then always leave the wire to the end and do the wire as a last thing to do. That. And then last of all, we'll take these wires. This one's going to come across here and up to meet this one. Use 2.5mm wire on this. It's quite a big tree, so I want to make sure it's wired in nice and securely. Trim off any excess with some wire scissors, push it down into the soil. Same with this one over here. Let's just spin it round. This is going to come across this side of the root ball, like so. Trim off that excess, push it down into the soil. Just a final finish up. So this tree, I think the top of it had not had a good pruning back like this for probably, 6 or 7 years. The roots of it didn't look like they'd been done for probably about the same length of time. But now we've done both those things. We've got it in a more suitable pot in fresh akadama cut back all those long internodes and growth it didn't need. Next thing is to lift it outside and give it a good water. So we're just going to do that now. So if you want to follow me outside, I'll meet you outside.
Okay.
So now we're outside, we can give it a good water. Very important when you're using knee tachodama, it's quite dry out the bag, no moisture in it. We don't want it to suck moisture out the roots. So it's important to give it water straight away. We've just repotted it, wheeled it outside the studio. We'll give it a good soak to settle it in. And then we can put this tree, we'll put it in just an unheated greenhouse. We've given a couple of frosts out next week. So we'll put it in an unheated greenhouse for the next couple of weeks or so. Again, if you've enjoyed our video, please subscribe and give us a like, and keep your eye out for more videos coming up over the next few days. Thank you.